So today I'm going to be showing you how to make a really simple and traditional North Indian curry. These are the ingredients we're going to be using. Firstly, here I've got kind of like a thumb-sized piece of ginger. I've got 2 cloves of garlic. I've got a single chilli. If you like to have your curries a bit more spicy, then you can add more than one. I've got a red onion. Most people choose to use white, but I'm using red today. Either is fine. I've got 2 teaspoons of turmeric. I've got 1 teaspoon of salt. I've got a bay leaf, a black cardamom, 2 cloves, some cinnamon bark, and in this pile here I've got about a palmful of coriander seeds and cumin, and in there also you'll see I've got some black peppercorn. This mixture here, all of these separate pieces along with a bay leaf, go together to make something that you guys will see in the shops called Garam Masala. So when you receive your pack from home, all of this will already be grinded up for you, so you don't have to worry about doing that. I use a simple coffee grinder. If you've got a pestle and mortar, you can do it like that as well, but obviously that takes a bit longer. And if you decide in the future that you want to go off and buy these things individually, you now know which things you need. So I'm going to go ahead and just chop all of the onion, the garlic and the ginger, and I'll be grinding all of these into a powder. Okay, so now I'm going to chop the onion. Firstly, I'm going to take the head off using a vegetable knife. Then I'm going to take the bottom off. I'm going to lay it flat so it's got a good surface. Take off the outer layers and chop it right through the middle. My hand on top, making sure I'm not cutting my hand. Placing them both face down. I'm going to take off that outer layer. And then here you can see along the onion there are already some real natural lines, so I'm going to slice along those natural lines. Just do this slowly and carefully. And I'm going to go with the natural curve of the onion. You can choose to dice your onions if you like. I actually quite like large onions, so I'm going to keep mine like this, but if you want to dice them, then that's completely up to you. Always make sure you've got a firm base on the onion when you're chopping. If it starts to become a bit loose, then just readjust the onion. Rid of that little bit. There we go, 1 chopped onion. So I'm going to chop the ginger now, and often you've got kind of a bit of a gnarly bit at the end, so I'm just going to chop that bit off, get rid of that. Chop the other gnarly bit off and get rid of that, and chop the end off. You can cut the garlic if you want to take off the skin, but a way that I've found really cleverly to get the skin off is to actually use a spoon. So because it's curved, it goes naturally with the side of the ginger, and all the skin comes off without taking off layers and layers of the actual flesh, which you can use in the curry. So that's a great way. You can see here it's coming off really nicely and simply just with a little teaspoon, and I'm not using all of the flesh, so it's a good way to get more from your ginger, is to use a little spoon. Go, it's all coming off. Comes off quite easily. Go, nearly done. This final little piece here. Strange shape that I've created, but there we go, I've managed to get it off. Okay, fantastic. So that is our ginger peeled. And should be left with about a thumb size. So I'll get rid of all these little pieces. Onto the garlic. So I'm just going to take the bottoms off. Like that. And if the garlic's a bit tough, something that you can do is just put a bit of pressure on top of the garlic with your knife. You can hear it crack like that, and that loosens all of the skin around so that it comes off a little bit easier, all in one go like that. I'm going to chop the garlic here. I'm not going to chop it too fine. You can use a grater for this if you like to have your garlic and ginger really fine, or you can use a food processor to chop it finer. I'm not too bothered. I actually eat a lot of ginger and garlic and I quite like the flavour of it, so for me, as long as it's just chopped up a little bit, that's fine. But if you find the flavours a bit overpowering, then something you can do is grate them a bit finer. So that's all fine for me. Chop the ginger a little bit finer, but again, I like the flavour of ginger, so I'm not too fussed if it's not tiny. Go. Where possible, I'm trying to keep my hand on top of the knife instead of in front of it, and that way I don't accidentally chop my fingers. Doesn't matter if the onions get involved at this point because they're all going to be going in at the same time roughly anyway, so don't worry about that too much. Okay, that's fantastic. That you want to have your ginger and garlic into a kind of paste, then what I've done here is I've just batched up in the ice cube tray. In each section I've got roughly 2 cloves of garlic and a thumbful of ginger, and this I've actually grated and then left in my freezer, so that each time I'm going to do a curry I can just get one of these out rather than going through this whole process, and it keeps for much longer. Okay, so now I'm going to chop up the chilli. I'm going to take the head off. If you don't like to have too much of a spice, then you can always take the seeds out from the inside. So you can slice down the chilli. Just like this. And inside you'll see, if I get my spoon again, that we can actually scrape the chilli seeds out, because that's where the heat comes from. So if you don't want those seeds, you can just scrape them out like that. I'm not too bothered because I quite like a bit of heat with my curry, but if you don't, then you can just take them out like that, pop them to one side. Remember not to touch them with your bare skin because they're ever so hot and that heat is transferable. So I'm going to turn this over and then I'm just going to chop it finally. So I've got a few seeds left in there, which I'm not too fussed about. There we go. So all of this, the chilli, the garlic, the ginger and the onions are going to be going in at a very similar time. The vegetables I'm going to be using today are a carrot, potato and some frozen peas. You can pretty much put in whichever vegetables you like. So all of this choice is up to you. Whatever vegetables you prefer, but today I'm going to use what I've got in my fridge. So I've got a carrot, a potato and just a little cupful of frozen peas. I'm going to peel the carrot, peel the potato, fine. fine. Just pop them to one side. With the carrot, I'm going to top and tail it again, so take off the bottom, take off the top. I'll cut it in half first to make it easier to cut. If you've got a larger knife, then you can cut carrots easier than if you've got a shorter knife. But I'm going to cut it down the middle and then lay it on a firmer base. I won't quite cut that. So lay it on a firmer base so it's easier to cut. And how big or small you want to cut your carrots is up to you. Okay. There we go again. Put them both on the big base. I'm just going to keep chopping these so they get quite small. Potatoes obviously cook quite quickly, so I don't want them to make them too small, otherwise they can disintegrate while you're cooking. So always turning it back onto the wider base. Okay, so we've got smaller pieces, but not too small. Make that one a bit smaller. Try to make them roughly the same size as possible so they can all cook through. There we go. So here you can see that's the garam masala. I've ground it up and now it's become like a powder. So this is how you receive it in a powder form, and it's the browner powder, and the more orangey colour powder is the turmeric. If you actually confuse these two, it doesn't matter too much because we'll be putting them in the pan at the same time. So when you receive your pouches, you can just pop them in together. That's not a problem. You can see also here that I've added tinned tomatoes, and here I've just got a tablespoon and a half of oil. I'm using sunflower oil, but if you want to use vegetable oil, that's fine, or some people like to use ghee. I prefer to use sunflower oil, but either of those is fine. So we're ready to get started with the cooking. Now we're going to get on with cooking the curry. I'm going to light the gas. That's quite high. Bring it right down low. Okay, so I'm going to place in the oil, which we already measured out earlier. Put that in, let that heat up for a moment. Make sure it covers the whole of the base of the pan. That's it. Okay, and let that just warm up a little bit. We'll get ready with our onions, which are going to go in first. And I'm using a wooden spoon. So if you keep an eye on the oil, you can see that it slightly starts to change. And might even bubble a little, which indicates it's ready. Yep, I can hear a little spit. So that means it's ready for me to go in with the onions. Okay, so I'm just going to put the onions in. You can hear that sizzling. I'm going to hold off with the garlic just now. I'm not going to put all those onions in because actually I'm using quite a small pot. So I'm just going to let these onions move around in the oil a little bit first. And as the onions start to cook, what happens is they start to go transparent. So they go from a very white colour to a kind of translucent colour. And obviously, because I'm using red onions, they even go kind of like a very pale, translucently kind of purple. Because you start to see the skin colour coming through into the flesh. So I'm just stirring them around, making sure they're well covered in the oil. The smell that comes off the onions is wonderful. Instantly you already know you're going to be making something really special. So I'll leave those just for a few minutes longer. They're starting to go a little bit transparent. And what we want to avoid is them burning. So if you start to see that, just turn the gas down a little bit. So you'll see that these onions have now become very translucent. They're no longer that kind of bright white colour that they went in as, and they're much softer. Okay, then I'm going to go in next with the ginger, the garlic and the chilli. The garlic cooks quite quickly. You want to make sure that you don't get any burnt garlic, because that really doesn't have a nice flavour to it at all. So this next section happens quite quickly. So I'm moving that around, the ginger, the garlic, chilli and the onions, making sure that the oil is coating it all nicely. Yep, and as you have a smell, you can smell that ginger and garlic coming through nicely. Okay, so next what we're going to do is add the salt. So just a few minutes with the ginger and the garlic, doesn't have to be as long as the onions were at all. So that's absolutely fine. In with the salt, in with the turmeric, and in with the Garam Masala. We'll try and get that all in there. So there we go, it's all in the pot together at the moment. Okay, and then I'm just going to mix that in. And leave that for a few more minutes. I'm going to turn the gas right down low now. So we get a bit of time for the oil and the spices to come together. Okay, so that's been going for a few more minutes now. You'll start to see everything starting to caramelise, and you might be able to see the oil is starting to separate away from the spices, which is what we're waiting for. And when that starts to happen, you're at the beginning of a sauce. So I'm going to give this a little bit more of a stir. Leave it again while we get our next vegetables ready. Okay, so I've moved hobs. so that it's a bit easier for you to be able to see what's actually going on in the pot. So I'm going to turn that heat off and turn this one on. And I'll still have it on a bit of a low heat. Hopefully it doesn't get too steamy. So now you should be able to see that all of this is really nicely softened. We're ready to add in some vegetables. So firstly I'm going to put in the peas. Because they're frozen and they've got a little bit of water with them, that will just help to lubricate everything. Put those in. I'm going to make a little space and put potatoes in. And carrots. And then I'm just going to move the mixture around so that it begins to colour the potatoes and the carrots. They begin to take on some of the flavour. So the next thing I'm going to do is add in some tinned tomatoes. If you don't like tinned tomatoes, you can use fresh tomatoes. Obviously there isn't as much juice in fresh tomatoes, so you have to kind of put in a bit of water. Or if you completely don't like tomatoes, then you can simply just add water. And I would do that slowly as you go along. You could also choose to, if you are just using water, boil your potatoes separately and add them in so that it doesn't have to go for as long. So that's all nicely covered. And I'm going to add in around about half a tin. So I'll put in 3. See how we go with that. Always better to add in a bit less than a bit more, because you can add more, but it's very difficult to begin to take away. So these are plum tomatoes. I'm just breaking them up, getting all the lovely juices out. Just breaking them up a little bit. We'll turn the heat up a little bit now, because the more volume that's in the pan, it begins to cool, so you want to keep it warm. So I'm turning the heat up a little bit. Okay, we can start to see that there's a sauce coming, and the sauce is gradually going to a more yellowy colour, which is the turmeric. So for now I'm going to leave it like that, and I'm going to pop a lid on, just let it simmer. So I'm going to take the lid off again, and now we've got this really beautiful kind of red, orange, yellow colours going on. I'm just going to give that a stir, and this is exactly what we're looking for the oil to have gone all the way through, to have changed colour completely, and to have this kind of nice, almost creamy sauce that's come together. So I'm going to turn the gas off, because that's ready. And then here I'm just gonna, you see that I've just put some lettuce, some carrot that I've grated up around here. Just put that there for a second. So here you can see I've just got a naan bread, some lettuce and carrot, And here I've got a bit of Indian pickle, which I always love to have with my curries. So I'm going to pop this down here. And then I'm just going to plate on some of the vegetables. Don't worry about what it looks like, because it's going to taste fantastic. And it might be a slightly different taste to what you're used to. So be prepared for that. India has many different regions, and in all the different regions they use a different combination of spices. So this might be slightly different to what you're used to. I think that'll be enough for me. One more potato. There we have it. Your dinner is ready to eat.